Now on this, and we're joined by Brooks Spector, a former United States diplomat. Brooks, good evening to you and thank you for your time. Kamala Harris, very clear that there is immense suffering in Gaza and an immediate ceasefire is needed right now. What do you understand about the deal that she is talking about, that she says it is on the table? It's up to Hamas to either adhere to the conditions of that deal or else.
Well, good evening. I think part of this is not, as some people are saying, a reversal of U.S. policy, as I understand it at least, but an evolution in it, because the deal that is, quote unquote, on the table includes a complete enumeration of the hostages and a plan for releasing them, as well as a counter release of some people incarcerated by the Israelis from among the Palestinian population, I suspect mostly on the West Bank, but also the idea that a ceasefire is not a unilateral idea. It's not one way. That would have to, I believe, include a ceasefire of rockets aimed at Israel, at least from Gaza as well. But all of this fits into an evolving plan, a grand design, if you will, that the Biden administration is somehow trying to make happen, that would include the aforementioned ceasefire. It would include an end to Hamas's stranglehold over Gaza. There would be, in some way, shape, or form, a new kind of more effective government for West Bank and Gaza territories. But also, and I think part of the main motivation for the Americans is a rapprochement between Israel and a number of important Arab states like Saudi Arabia. All those things coming together then begin to look like the grand design, the grand plan, a master strategy that produces, if not peace in the Middle East, at least something that looks like less warfare. Now, whether or not that would manage to include Hezbollah rockets from southern Lebanon or Houthi rockets from Yemen is a whole other kind of question. But part of this also is, I think, a recognition that the Netanyahu government, especially its right-wing fringe, the two ministers, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, have been very much opposed to anything moving in this direction. And in fact, some right-wingers are saying, like, we need to add more settlements to the West Bank, as if that's going to solve things, which it would not. But it also shows a certain degree of impatience and a lack of happiness on the part of the Biden administration with Benjamin Netanyahu, who seems more than a recalcitrant and obdurate, let me use both of those words, in all of this. And I think the lack of total backing for the Netanyahu government, you can see it when a number of West Bank settlers were sanctioned because of their provocative activities in harassing or harming Palestinians in the West Bank. Yeah. So the evolution, I tend to think of it as an evolution of U.S. policy rather than a 180-degree turn, as some people would like to paint this as. Well, and go ahead.
There is a strong view, and I'm sorry to interrupt you there, Brooks. There is the strong view that this impatience of the Biden administration towards the Netanyahu government, perhaps it comes a little too late, because effectively the United States almost created this monster and allowed it to basically go on, even when the results were clear for all to see that the people the Palestinian people in Gaza are being devastated by this war. Is this impatience coming now as a result of the pressure, perhaps, that President Biden is starting to experience back home in an election year where he clearly is getting some pushback?
Well, first of all, let me give you a thought experiment to focus on this question. Let's assume that the Biden grand design, the grand scheme, the grand plan actually comes together in large part. If that happens, then 5 years, 10 years from now, we might well have a conversation in which we discuss the relative success of it, despite the hardships that occurred, despite the death and destruction that did occur. And the Israelis will always remind you, of course, that this current chapter in things kicked off with the raid by Hamas into Israel proper, killing 1,200 people and seizing 230, 250 hostages in the process. But you are also correct in saying that the Biden administration is paying attention to the temper of some Americans. Now, in the Michigan primary, Michigan is a Midwestern state with a significant Arab American or Muslim American population. The two groups are not exactly the same because there are Christian Arab Americans too, and there are Muslim Americans who don't happen to come from the Middle East. So the two groups are not precisely the same. But in the Democratic primary election that took place there last week, Joe Biden won 81% of the vote. The non-committed or uncommitted received 103,000 votes, or 13%. And you can view that as deeply felt dissatisfaction or protest vote, and it may be both of them for that matter. But it does. The problem for the Biden administration is, in the political sense, failing to win the state of Michigan would likely doom his reelection chances significantly, because it is a major state that the Democrats traditionally understand that they have to win in presidential elections. And there is also, among a number of different interest groups within the Democratic coalition, broadly speaking, growing dissatisfaction with the way the Israelis have carried out this ongoing attack on Gaza, and the extent to which the United States is enmeshed in that. So pull all these things together, and that's why I say this is an evolution away from a totally full-hearted, full-throated embrace of Benjamin Netanyahu, but not at the same time breaking with the Israeli government. Because if you look at the numbers in Congress, and Congress has the power of the purse, if you look at Congress, a majority of Republican and Democratic members of the House and the Senate both remain strongly committed to supporting Israel. Yeah. And the bill, the supplemental budget bill that is stalled now is not stalled because of dissatisfaction supporting Israel, or, for that matter, to a considerable degree, supporting Ukraine, but it's a snit fight over how funds and efforts will or won't be directed toward the American southern border, which is with Mexico. And, of course, Donald Trump managed to turn this thing into, there was a near agreement, and he insisted that Republicans should not support it, thereby either giving him something he can whack the Democrats with about their failure to solve the border crisis, or the Democrats to say it's all Donald Trump's fault. So it depends on how you want to look at that. But to sum up, the turn is gradual, the turn is specific in some ways, but it is not all-encompassing. Let me put it that way.
All right. So let's conclude then. And I like the term that you're using there, the use of the word term. The turn here I would also like to ask this question, that is this turn primarily about self-interest of the Biden administration, basically Joe Biden wanting to get re-elected, or might there also be worry that because of the steadfast support that the United States has given to Israel, that there might be worry of being complicit to a possible genocide? And I use those words very carefully. Possible genocide, because remember, the International Court of Justice is seized with that matter. Does that matter to Joe Biden? Getting re-elected? Is that what this is about? Or is this about also the worry that we might be complicit to possible genocide?
Like any decision in the political realm, whether it's in the United States or South Africa or China, there is always an element of self-interest, whether it is among the leadership or self-interest on behalf of a country as defined by the way the leadership thinks things should be. I don't think the Biden administration, at least from what I've read or heard so far, was particularly concerned with the way the International Court of Justice took up the issue, because they did not, after all, accuse the Israelis of committing a genocidal act. And in fact, the decision, when it comes, will be years in the making. And in the interim, the injunctions, the instructions were to not carry out acts that could be construed that way. So those people who want to somehow wrap this all up in the questions of potential genocide, I think are rather far in front of the actual quality of the discussion or the ruling that the court had issued. Having said that, Joe Biden, of course, would like to be reelected. The Democrats more generally would like to be reelected. The United States government in Congress and in the White House and so forth all generally feel supportive of Israel. At the same time, as we just talked earlier, the Biden administration has a growing impatience with the impetuousness, is not the right word I'm looking for, but the growing obdurateness, I guess I used that before, that the Netanyahu government is engaged in by making it as difficult as they can, just as Hamas is doing as well, to reach some sort of resolution on a ceasefire that has been that is coming close to being brokered in either Cairo or Qatar or wherever else they end up signing the accord. Because foreign policy and the politicians and the administrators who said it, it's always interlinked, and it's difficult to extract one thread and not see the others. It's just, that's the nature of things, whether it's an American government or a South African one, Chinese, Indian, wherever you look.
Brooks Spector, let me thank you very much for your time.